And it was also then through the business at Carleton where LVD kind of originally got started, right? It was in a class.
Yeah. So in my first entrepreneurship class, we had to do a group project where we like made up a business. Like it's the classic, like brainstorm 50 ideas and then narrow it down. And then we did this whole presentation and I was just like so not into it. And I had like a really random group because it was like all the people that weren't in commerce, right? Everyone else like buddied up. And I was like, yeah, cool. Like I'll go with these random people. And we made this like toothbrush that was like classic idea, you know, like, oh, it also has floss in the bottom, like something that I did not really care about. And then the next year in entrepreneurship, I was like, hey, I want to focus on something that like I would actually want to build because I put so much work into that for something I wasn't passionate about. And that's the really great thing about the Carleton program is like they want you to actually be working on a real business. Like they don't want it once you like pass that first class. They're really big on like build something. Like why would you waste time on like a hypothetical project? So that was really cool. And as you mentioned, like with women in powerlifting, my first thing was like, I want to figure out a way to get women comfortable in powerlifting. And like, honestly, my first obstacle was just like, I wasn't a personal trainer and that wasn't really what I was trying to do. But that was that first idea. And then I was like, okay, so I know I want to support the powerlifting community. How can I do that? And it's funny, I don't really remember how this happened, but Josh and I were just like training partners at the time. And then for some reason, he agreed to work on it with me. I was like, I feel like I totally don't remember ever of that, like any of that conversation of me pitching him to like do my project with me when he wasn't in the class. But anyways, we started working on it and we had all these like really cool ideas, but they were all really heavy in research and development and startup costs. So we're like, okay, why don't we just make a brand and we can build that brand and then later we could do all those things. And that was something we felt was really missing was like a brand that we connected to because powerlifting was going through this transition from like where people pictured it as like bald, tattooed, like bearded, like exactly what people picture when they're confused when I say I powerlift, to this new age powerlifter that was kind of like us, you know, in university, like young, into like fashionable stuff. We don't want skulls necessarily on all our t-shirts, that kind of thing. So we're like, okay, let's just build a brand first and connect this community that's kind of all over, but not really like meeting. Like Instagram in fitness was still early-ish. So it was like you had your friends that were, you know, further in Ontario, but you knew each other from Instagram. And then at the meet you would meet. So we're like, okay, let's do something to connect all these people.
Mm-hmm. So talking about how you scale that brand, because at the end of the day, like you had, it was basically selling the idea.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, with an apparel brand, everyone's just trying to sell their graphic tee versus another one. So how did you get people to kind of connect with yours and really grow that?
I think being in the community made a big difference because we were our ideal customer. So that definitely helps. Like I always tell people for a first business, like if you can be your ideal customer, it's going to help you so much because like you just have to think like, would I like this? And it makes it that much easier. And then I think it was just honestly being like genuine and actually connecting with people. Like we would go to all the events and we would talk to people for so long at our booth. Like they would tell us all about their meet and we were like genuinely interested. Right. And I think people also just like think it's really cool to see someone they know like win, which is so funny. But like, I think a lot of how we did well too was like being Canadian. Like people just wanted to see a Canadian brand do well. And even like our friends in the States, like they just loved that we were Canadian. So sometimes there's stuff like that can help you out. It's just like, people want to be able to say like, I know Mal and Josh, you know, and they want you to go far with it. So when they see the brand, they can like, so many people will brag that they have our original shirt, right? Like, or how long they've been a customer for. So I think just having that really genuine connection and people seeing like, oh, these are actually really cool people I'd be friends with made them want us to win even more. And it just really helped like spread that movement.
One cool thing that you did early on with the brand that I wanted to ask you about was you sponsored the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was before like podcasts were really mainstream because they've really blown up in the last couple of years. But like, so where did you guys
like, how did you even find that out? But yeah, it's good research.
So where did that idea come from? Where you guys like, we should sponsor this podcast?
We honestly, I'm not going to lie. Like we were lucky for that. They were like, do you want to sponsor us? Because they were building a podcast. It was 3 guys that were just really passionate about powerlifting. And same thing, like they really wanted to see a brand in powerlifting grow. They thought it was cool that one of the guys always says like, we made powerlifting cool again. So they were really cool, and they were like, you know what, we just have some basic equipment that we need to cover. So if you guys want to cover that, and we were like, sure. So that was really cool. And it was honestly like them almost helping us out, because it was getting our name just like on a different platform, because we didn't have a podcast or anything like that. And then we actually sponsored another powerlifting podcast after that. And same thing, like they, I guess, probably saw the first one and then reached out to us. So that's the cool thing. Like everyone's so willing to collaborate. Even early on, like we sponsored the top Canadian male powerlifter, and we sponsored the top male powerlifter like in the world and top female in the world. And people are always like, oh my God, like, how did you get them? You know, like how much did you have to pay? And I'm like, well, the guy followed us on Instagram, and then I followed back and messaged him right away. And we literally Skyped. He was like chilling, eating a popsicle after a workout. And he just really liked what we were doing with the charity aspect of our business. And then for the female, like we had met her at an event, and it was an event we sponsored, and we were just helping out, you know, being on the ground. Like, so we were driving her around because they needed someone to drive her, and we just got to know her. And then I remember leaving that weekend, we were like, wouldn't it be so cool if one day we sponsored her? And like not even 4 days later, she sent me a Facebook message, and she was like, I really want to work with you guys. Like, I don't go after a lot of sponsors because like, basically like, I'm a full grown woman. I don't need the money from sponsors. She's like, but I want to see you guys grow, and I think you could be really great. So it's like, you want to say it's luck, but it's also not just luck, right? Like obviously we had a really genuine connection there, and she believed in what we were doing. But I believe like we were also really lucky that all those things kind of fell into place, and we were able to connect with people like that, which isn't really luck, because we, I mean, like bent over backwards to get to that event to sponsor it, you know what I mean? Like, but from afar, it kind of looks lucky.
So looking back on LVD, is there anything else, like some standout moments in those where you sponsor these huge athletes? Is there any other like standout moments from your time building that business? Like
cool moments or moments that like helped build us?
Probably like both, either or.
The coolest moments is definitely when we see someone wearing LVD like out in the wild and they don't know us, because a lot of people are like in the community or like knew the brand through us. We've had times, there's one like really early on, we were at the mall and this girl was like down a floor and she was wearing the hat, and we yelled down, we were like, nice hat. And she was literally looking around like, me? Like she thought we were crazy, and we were like, she doesn't know like that hat is from our basement. And like those moments are really cool where you're like, oh, because obviously it's nice when people support you for you, but it's like, it's really cool to be like, you just like came across this brand and like you actually just really liked it and decided to buy it. Like that's the really cool moments for us. I'm trying to think about something. I think one of the cool things with like the startup world, like I mentioned how you can just try things, like we would kind of set arbitrary sales goals for the month, and then the second we had a number in mind, it was like, okay, how are we going to get there? And we didn't have like a budget for marketing. Like I'm talking, we spent $0. Like everything was organic, or like MailChimp that's free up to a certain amount. But it was just so cool to challenge yourself that way and then get so creative. Like our email lists ended up making us the most money. And like I said, it's like a free platform, but we just got really strategic and like, okay, how do we get our Instagram followers to sign up for our email list? And like, how do we make that attractive? So we would do an early launch just to our email list. And people loved that because they were buying and then posting on social, and then people would search it and they wouldn't be able to find it because they didn't have access. So just playing with stuff like that and seeing the immediate results. I think also because I came from like high tech B2B marketing, where one company, our sales cycle was literally 2 years. So I like wasn't even there long enough to see somebody buy from like my marketing. So it's so cool to like send an email and then just like watch orders come in. And as we would keep launching, we would keep perfecting it even better. And like, it was just so rewarding and cool to see like, wow, we made this thing and people actually want it, you know? And like these tactics we're trying are really fun and they're actually working.
Yeah. And so you said how you like with each launch, you kind of iterate and you pivot and make it better. So looking back on it now, what are some things that you know, what you know now that you do differently?
Well, looking at like products specifically, like for something like apparel for us, one of the really early lessons was like we had to drop bigger collections because especially with shipping in Canada, it's so expensive. So if you drop like 2 shirts and somebody wants one and the shirt's $30 and shipping's $15, most people will talk themselves out of it, right? But if you're spending like $150 on stuff and shipping's 15, you usually are like, that's fine. Or people would go in with their friends and they would order together. So we noticed like as we grew the collection, we would sell, like the average cart value would go up, and just small stuff like that. And like we would take our average cart value, would say it's like $85. We made free shipping for orders over 100. So we were able to like boost up the average order size because most people are like, hell yeah, I'll order a little bit more and get free shipping. So yeah, I really nerd out on like those little things that we learned. But honestly, like whenever people say like, what would you do differently? Like I would say nothing, because each thing, even if it didn't go well, like I remember one time we launched a shirt in like August and we launched one shirt and it didn't do well, but then I learned, right, from that is how we started making these really cool collections. And then from the collections, we started making them more like themed, like they had a very clear storyline. And then from there we did like a launch, like one of the launches, we changed like all our Instagram to grayscale, and then with just like highlights of gold. And it was all about like leave your legacy. And then we made a cool video. So it was like each launch we were learning like a little bit more of how to do it well.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about there, how like with the emails, when you would add like $100 to get free shipping, were you guys very like data driven? Like were you looking at analytics a lot? Like was that helping you make your decision, or was it almost like a gut feel type thing, just what you'd kind of observe, not from a data perspective?
Yeah, it's like a gut feeling on data, if that makes sense. Okay. Like, because obviously the data is showing it, but I'm like someone who always says to listen to your data, but I've never been like if you asked me numbers off the top of my head, I don't know like certain things. I might know like our email conversion rate. But yeah, it's like, that's the cool thing about a business like this, where it's so instant, where someone can buy something, is like you send that email, you know right away if it's working, because you either made a good amount of money or it's crickets, right? So I always say it's gut, but it's like smart gut, I guess you would call it. Yeah, and just little things like we would play with. If people abandon their carts, we would send like an email that's like, hey, I know shipping sucks, here's $5 off. And it was a really great converter. And sometimes it's not even that it was shipping that threw people off. It's like they didn't have their credit card on them, but now you've reminded them and you've given them $5 off. So like that was a small thing where like instantly people were converting. So you almost don't even need to go look at the data. You're just like, yeah, I can see this is working. I can see people are using the discount code, right?